Hi, good morning. My name is Louise. I'm the editor of Drone Professional 1. This is a book that came out at the beginning of this year. It's an Amazon bestseller, and it features 16 professional drone experts from around the world giving their current thinking on drone technology and the drone industry. It covers a whole range of subjects, whether we're looking at drone insurance, to getting good data, to applying drones above the fields for conservation and for security. And really, these experts are showing or showcasing their best practice, their case studies, and just sort of giving some really interesting information about the industry, the professional industry. I've got one of those specialists with me today. It's Tawanda Chihambakwe from Zimbabwe. Thanks very much for joining me.
Hi, thanks, Louise.
Cool. You wrote a particularly interesting chapter in this book, Education and the Future of the Drone Profession. But before we get to that, how did you get into this industry? What's your background?
Well, actually, I'm coming from a completely different industry. I've been involved in media and film production professionally in terms of my career. My background and training is more in business management and administration. And I've been involved in a number of different projects with one of my co-founders. Actually, we're involved in a number of technology or fintech projects prior to getting into the drone industry. And it was through one of these projects that we were doing together that then got us into the industry. And it's a funny story, really. We entered a national competition run by our Ministry of Information and Technology, and we came second overall nationally. And we developed a relationship with the ministry. This must be in 2015. And from there, we were privileged enough to be invited when our ministry here of information was invited to go to Rwanda by the Rwandan government, just in terms of information sharing kind of projects, you know, between governments and that kind of thing. So my co-founder went. I wasn't able to go because of work commitments, and he went with this team. It must have been the minister, the deputy minister, and a number of people within that ministry. And he went in 2016 now. And it happened to be the time when Zipline was just in the final stages of actually launching their project, which is now, you know, obviously everyone knows about Zipline now and what they're doing with emergency medical deliveries. And my co-founder got to see that alongside the ministry there. And then he came back all excited about drones. And he said, hey, drones are the future, drones are the thing. And I was like, no. Let's focus on our project and finish our project first. And as it were, our project didn't get the traction that we had expected and the funding that we were looking for. And one day I was sitting at home and I started researching about drones, you know, and looking at drones. And I remember distinctly that day getting into it and starting to do research. And from that point on, I think I probably spent every night for the next 4 or 5 months doing research around the industry. And the more I read, the more I got into it, And before I did anything in terms of actually going out and trying anything or buying my first drone, I had done so much research around the future and what industries, you know, drones would be involved in and the impact that it could have. So I became sold on the dream. And then I decided, you know what, I looked, obviously, because I stay in Zimbabwe and we have a good relationship with South Africa. I looked at what South Africa was doing at the time. And the thing that stuck out for me, which I really, you know, had a heart for, was the drone racing aspect and how racing drones are, you know, modular, because you get to build them yourself. You get to really immerse yourself in the technology and build it, versus the camera drones, which we're so familiar with, which everyone buys, and out of the box, it's got obstacle avoidance and you press a button, it goes up and comes down and, you know, return to home, etc. I was like, no, I want to understand the technology from a perspective of building it. So drone racing was my entry point into doing that. We then started, I guess, bringing in different parts and elements and assembling a couple of our own racing drones and just, you know, playing around with the tech. And yeah, we haven't stopped since.
Well, it's amazing. I mean, looking at what you do, I mean, you are totally immersed in drone technology, drone industry. I mean, your drone racing, your drone services, you educate, you know, the forum. I mean, we'll get onto that just now, but it's incredible that the sort of you totally sort of absorbed and got into the industry. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I don't know what time. You mustn't have any time left.
Yeah, I don't get a lot of sleep. I must say, like for a long time, I'd sleep like 2 in the morning, 1 in the morning. Doing research,
Yeah.
like watching videos and reading articles, and trying to find as much information as I can about what's happening. What's going to happen, and how we can influence that in Africa. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it's hard to keep up with what's happening, actually. I mean, there are so many news channels bringing all these positive ways in which drones are influencing society in one form or another. Hey.
Yes, indeed.
I'm curious. I mean, before we get on to maybe about your chapter, I mean, the drone racing. I mean, that's a totally different. I mean, well, sorry, my perception is it's a totally different set of skills that you need compared to like you sort of hinted at there for professional use. I mean, your flying skills are something else, hey, aren't they, for a drone race?
Yeah, so I actually found that, I was like, let me start. The way I compared it, I was like, a racing drone's like driving a manual car, versus a camera drone, which is automatic, and, you don't put a lot of effort in doing that. So I was like, I'd rather learn how to drive a manual car first, because by the time then you go on to driving automatic car, it's pretty easy and simple. And that's the route that I followed, in being able to actually learn how to control the drone on your own. So even when you're doing like, I guess now when you're doing your testing for your exam to actually get your license, they put it in ATI mode. And it's like, a lot of people, it's like, what is going on here?
Yes.
Whereas with the racing drones, that's your everyday. You're in control of the drone 100%. If you don't balance it out and level it out, it doesn't do it on its own. So learning about that gives you so much more control. Also gives you so much more courage to be able to do more and go further with the other types of drones. Once you've learned the principles of flight and how to keep it in the air and how to land it safely on your own without any additional technology support. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting thing. I mean, yesterday chatting to Rabi in Dubai, he was saying he actually employs drone racing and serious drone hobbyists to actually fly for him because of their skills. And I thought that was a really interesting thought. That's his pilot base of using drone racing, because sometimes there seems to be a bit of a them and us, isn't there? With drone racing is that's that and this bit. So this part of drone operation is over here, and they don't often seem to want to come together.
Yeah. But like you can see, like even this behind me here, I've got a couple of the racing drones here, and the thing with them is their racing drones are going like between 80 and 120 k's an hour, in terms of speeds that you're actually flying at. And the maneuvers that you kind of do as well. We then bring in the headsets with the goggles and everything, and the fully immersive FPV experience. It's really something, and I really encourage a lot of people to just if you get into that and see how that can benefit and improve your skills, it's actually a good way to improve your skills. Even with the professional drones or industrial grade drones that we're more involved with now. Drone racing is definitely like a base, and for me, even with the education, that's really where it starts, because people can tinker with building drones and how do I get this motor, the bigger the motor, how does that impact the type of frame that you have to have, and the speed controllers, all that kind of stuff. You really get down to the actual nitty-gritties of the tech and understanding how it works, such that you'll be able to then innovate further. If we say we wanted to build a drone, for a specific purpose in the professional industry or industrial type of thing, you understand it from that perspective of how it all works.
No, good point. I must admit, I keep meaning to buy a kit and build my own for exactly the reason that you said there, to really get to grips with what it is and why it is and how it, I mean, I obviously know how it works, but the point being is just to have fun with it and just test it. I mean, I've got a nice simulator, and I sort of use FPV on there occasionally. But obviously that's not the same as flying for real. But it's kind of cool to actually have that freedom to just and learn the skills to a degree. But I'd like to try it in the field one day. But at least build my own.
It's good.
So I'll come and chat to you about that.
Sure, you should come. We could go out flying together. Fine.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would love that.
Yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
I think that'd be good. A very good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, definitely. I think, yeah, we should have a bit of fun and film it maybe. How not to do it from my side anyway. I mean, in terms of your chapter, I mean, you cover the drone racing, but your chapter, the education and the future of the drone profession, perhaps sort of just cover some of the points that you raise in there, because I mean, you cover a lot of topics. It's a very interesting chapter.
Well, I mean, I was privileged to actually be invited, I guess, by you to be part of the book, and I count it a privilege, to be amongst the 16 professionals from around the world at a stage where we're still at a stage of also learning and discovering. And I think in the book I was talking about us being immigrants to this technology, similar to the way we were to cell phones. And why I said that is because we've grown up in a world where drones didn't exist. 10 years ago, no one would have dreamed or had the idea of, okay, I'm going to make this a career. There were a few who had started getting involved, but very few throughout the world. 10 years ago, we were all involved in something else. So now we are basically adopting this technology. So the understanding that we have of it is how it relates to the world and how the world also relates to the technology, which is different to the way it'll be probably 10 years from now, and especially with students and kids, who are growing up now in the drone age, as I would put it. So looking at that, I was saying the foundation of the future of the industry really comes down to what are we teaching kids in, our schooling systems, and the future of innovation within the drone space and the drone industries, regardless of which country, whether you're in Africa or in America, it really comes down to the young people. And I was looking and seeing that, who are the people who are dominating right now in terms of the big players in the drone industry, the big manufacturers. A lot of those guys are actually making serious investments into education, into training young people, into getting the young minds involved in the technology, getting them to see that these are not toys, and that's probably one of the first steps we need to deal with, is that people see it as toys. And the people who see it as toys are really, I guess, adults and parents who at first, if they view it as if they see it as toys, they don't take it seriously or don't allow their children to take it seriously. So we need to encourage it from an education standpoint and get into the schools and, from high school right through to universities, and getting people to see and understand that the way work used to be done can't be done like that anymore. There's a faster, more efficient way to use it, whether it's in agriculture or in mining or in actual, surveyors, even surveyors themselves, their world has completely been changed, around how they do their work because of drones. And we need to get that ingrained in the education sector quickly for us to be able to then benefit from the future of that. One of the other things I was looking at is also to say, when we look at the superpowers in terms of the actual drone industry, Africa is always those who are involved in buying. So we're always consumers. We're buying from China, predominantly. And I know South Africa is doing well in terms of now starting to manufacture drones. There's a few companies doing it, but there aren't enough people doing it. There's so many different types of drones, so we need more people to see that this is something that we can actually build. And we have the skills. We just need to direct the skills into a place and in a way to say, hey guys, let's build drones and let's come up with solutions to local problems in our local context. A lot of the time we're buying drones from other countries, China or wherever it is, to come and solve problems here and trying to make it fit in our context, whereas we could be doing it ourselves. So I was really encouraged, and I said, you know what? We need to go beyond just educating. And education is good. That's like, you learn all these subjects, but actual hands-on skills, there's a huge shortage of that, and drones provide an opportunity to bridge that, where you can get involved from an education standpoint in so many different ways, whether you are, so baseline, it's like, just the basic of learning how to build a drone. That's one aspect. There's guys who are also then involved in the software development aspect. That's also a thing that we can do through education. Then there's the data analysis, all the different data sets that come from you know, the different sensors that you use and all that kind of thing. All these are different jobs, I would say, or skills that we could be teaching kids in school, such that they can then pursue a career to say, hey, I'm a data analyst who analyzes drone data for agriculture. That's a job. That's a whole job for someone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
kids could then come straight out of high school, not even necessarily have to go to university and spend so much money going to university trying to figure out, you know, what they want to do. They can go straight into, you know, probably going to get some sort of professional course once we set up the institutions that teach people about how to process data and analyze it and package it in a way that people can then use it to make decisions. So it's things like that that I was saying, you know, it's important that we get our governments to start seeing that way, but also as us as industry players, you know, we're the guys who are at the forefront of understanding this tech. So we also need to lead in terms of going and helping to educate and providing those kind of opportunities for people to learn, you know, whether it's being internships and bringing kids on to, you know, our part of, to join our companies for 6 months or a year or whatever it is, or going into schools, which is what we're trying to do here now in Zimbabwe. There's so many different ways that we could tackle this and get in there. But the fundamental thing is the foundation is in the future of how our education system is going to work. We know it's already broken in many ways. And this is a way that we could help to fix it such that we can take a position of, I guess, authority and being an advantage in the future. Yeah.
No, gosh, I mean, you said so many things I, you know, I want to ask more questions about, but you're absolutely right. I mean, that it's critical to get drones into the mainstream education. And for all the reasons that you said, these aren't toys. There are so many secondary or ancillary careers that come out of this. And I think it's too easy to focus on just this flying machine. It's, as you say, what do you do with the data afterwards? How do you turn that, you know, how do you enable things to talk to each other with the data that's coming across, for example, or analyze it or what have you? So no, there's enormous amounts of secondary industries that and careers that can grow out of this. And I think it's too easy to forget that. There was something else you said there. I thought it interesting also, you sort of said about foreign drones. You know, I've heard several stories where other countries have supplied the drone and it doesn't work here because it hasn't allowed for our particular climate conditions, or if you're working in Johannesburg, the altitude and things like that. And there have been some number of rewrites of software and programs and equipment to accommodate the different conditions that we have here compared to the foreign base from which a perfectly, you know, good drone, but it sort of comes down, you know, it's used here and you go, oh, hang on, I can't handle this altitude, or I can't handle the wind, or I can't handle the heat or the humidity. So it's quite interesting, actually. But I saw a lovely story last year somewhere. I think it was a gentleman in Uganda that built drones using bamboo frames.
Yes, I saw that.
He was using, yeah, I thought, what a brilliant story. And that's a classic one of what you're saying there, you know, that we need to do it ourselves here. So
on that, like even here in Zimbabwe, I know I'm connected to a lot of different people who do things here in Zimbabwe. So we have someone who also built a drone in one of the, not in the main city, but in one of the other cities, a city called Mutare. And he built a drone using different materials, scrap materials, and he also ordered some parts, you know, online, etc., like the motors and the propellers, etc. But the frame, essentially, he built, you know, with other things. And that made, you know, it made the news. It was in the newspapers and all that kind of stuff. And for me, I'm like, you know, the hype is good, but we need to convert the hype into actual action on the ground, because that was 2 years ago. And I talked to the guy now, and he's, you know, he hasn't been able to do anything with it because there isn't an enabling environment to say, okay, you've done this. It's very elementary what you've done, but it's good. You've shown the promise. How do we take what you've done and then bring it in and make it something that can be mainstream? Can we develop that into an actual drone that we could provide and actually use for commercial purposes? You know what I mean? Or is it just about making cool things that will make noise and people say, oh, well done, you know, that's great. But we've got to be able to transition from just, you know, doing cool things to actually getting it to solve problems.
Absolutely. I mean, is that what isn't there that new drone academy that's come out of the African Drone Forum the Lake Victoria. I think it's based in Ghana, but I think it's come out of that whole sort of initiative in around Lake Victoria, and it's a drone academy. But I don't know where that's going. I don't have enough information, but maybe that's something that.
Is that the one? That's the one. Is that the one? It's ADA, right? Africa Drone and Data Academy. Is that the one in? There's one in Malawi that was done by UNICEF.
Is it Malawi? Okay.
Malawi, yes.
I think it's that one.
Yes.
Yeah, it's an initiative come out of that whole thing with Malawi, Tanzania, and Ghana. You know, there's a whole group of countries that are really embracing the technology and driving the innovation, and I'm sure it's something that's come out. I'm sure it's been advertised through the African Drone Forum.
Yes, yes,
and the work they've done. I mean, that sort of brings. I mean, that's one of the big things still, isn't it? The regulations, you know, on how countries are embracing or not quite embracing the technology is still an issue. I think that we could probably talk about for many hours, but we better not. But I mean, that is the thing, isn't it? And I've seen people sort of referencing that perhaps now is a time where maybe there might be some more discussion about the harmonization of the regulations and enabling regulations. I don't know what your thoughts might be on that.
So interesting. Like you said, like for me, I struggle to define exactly like what I do within the drone space because I do so much. I've got the commercial drone company where we provide drone services. So I'm the founder of that, Precision Aerial. Then I'm co-founder of Drone Racing Zimbabwe, which is the first drone racing community. Then I'm also helping as an advisor to the civil aviation here, helping and volunteering my information and knowledge to try and help them to fast track the implementation of regulations. I was also involved in pushing for the actual regulations to be published. I held a number of public awareness events and, was lucky enough to get the actual, deputy minister responsible in the transport sector to come in, in 2018. And, on our platform that we created, he then made the commitment to say, look, I'll get the regulations out, which he fulfilled, which is amazing, great. And one of the things that we've been doing is, trying to say, how do we ready ourselves for, an environment where the regulations are actually implemented? So a big thing that we're focusing on is some training. And training in doing that, we've been looking around the world and seeing who can we work with? What's the best curriculum, to work with? The regulations, how are they, how do they differ in between different countries and regions? And one of the things is the thing that stuck out for us was about South Africa. South Africa being the first country in Africa to have regulations and one of the first in the world to have them. But at the same time, in sitting and talking to the guys who actually, were responsible in the South African civil aviation with like writing and crafting the laws, the big challenges being that the regulations haven't been reviewed for a long time. They were one of the first, but there's been no review. So now you are ahead, and then now the regulations are not meeting with, what's the current environment around the industry and what do we need to do. But one thing that stuck out is the United Kingdom, and we've started talking to guys there who are running training schools there, and they're in the process of actually doing what you're saying, is standardizing their regulations across the UK and across the EU in actual fact. And even though there's Brexit, they're still going ahead with actually standardizing their regulations across the EU, which is something that has taken a couple of years for them to get there. But the benefit obviously being that regardless of which country you get it in, the regulations apply across the board, which means there's an understanding between countries. You know what I mean? There's a lot of collaboration, there's a lot of room for it. Also, what that means is the price of actually getting the training will probably go down. You see what I mean? Because now there isn't that whole advantage, this person has advantage over this. You can go in any country in Europe, or eventually, I'm sure by the end of the year, you'll be able to go to any country in Europe and, get your license there, and it applies across the board, And for Africa, for us specifically, it comes down to that thing of, the blocks, Southern Africa, which is SADC, how, I guess, to what extent do our governments understand drone technology and how it can help? First of all, let's start there. Okay. Yeah. And South Africa is a different wavelength. compared to Zimbabwe, compared to Malawi, compared to, you know what I mean? So
Yes.
it's just like, you know, when you're sitting across in a room, you know, South Africa's talking about, you know, hey, South Africa's a stage where you're manufacturing your own drones, you know what I mean? Whereas Zimbabwe's like, we don't even have regulations implemented yet. Other countries don't have regulations, like Namibia, for example. I don't think theirs have been published yet, you know? So we're talking a different, you know, like we're not speaking at the same level when it comes to drones, you know? So that makes it very difficult to have any sort of progress or to even get to a stage where you're like, guys, let's standardize something. How do you standardize something you don't understand, you know, to start off with? But that then creates that issue that we're talking about, and that one country is doing something else and you're not talking together and seeing how it can help everyone else. You know, I've heard some people, even like you mentioned the African Drone Forum. I've got a couple of friends who are involved with that, and you know, I mean, they're talking about cross-border drone deliveries. You know what I mean? Like across, you know what I mean? I mean, that's a conversation where it's like, you know, I'm like, you guys are already there. They guys are going far and thinking about that already, and I'm like, but we're still here. You know what I mean? And to get there, I mean, the day we see that happening, I'll be like, wow, we've really come a long way, you know. But those are the kind of conversations we should be having, you know. Is how do we deliver even, you know, products or whatever it is across borders? How do we do that? You know?
Absolutely. I look at the African Drone Forum with envy quite a lot when you look at what they're doing and how they're facilitating this, you know, and how they, as I said, embracing this. Because, you know, I mean, I think there are so many things. I mean, to all fairness to all authorities, this thing is growing faster than the regulatory frameworks that we have to date. And that sort of poses a question, well, you know, shouldn't there be a civil aviation authority for unmanned traffic anyway, that's run by people that are from the drone industry, rather than trying to, you know, have manned aviation? You know, perhaps there's a future for that. But I've lost my point, which was something. But yeah, I mean, sorry, yeah, you're dealing with that. You still got the privacy issues. We haven't even begun to harmonize how to travel with the batteries. I mean, great to get the drone regulations, but where are the batteries in those regulations? I mean, you know, the other day I was trying to fly and I took my Phantom 4, and it was a bit of a mission trying to get the airline to approve it. And they said, well, what's a drone? And you say, oh, really? And,
we're in 2020 and you're asking what's a drone?
Yeah, it was last year. Yeah, it was last year. And I was going, really? But you hear of people not being able to travel internationally because if they use different airlines, one says okay, one says no, someone else says this, must be in this bag, must be in that bag. Oh, you can't travel with more than, what is it, 12,000 milliamps or whatever it might be, you know, and you just, yeah, and that's not being covered in the regulations that I can see, you know, and that's something else. Yeah, but yeah, there's a huge bubble around this that needs to be talked about, but yeah, I do look at Rwanda and Tanzania and Ghana and Malawi with a bit of envy. They've got it right, yeah.
No, they do. So sorry about that screaming. I don't know if you heard the screaming. The kids are like in the other room.
Oh, shame. No, I didn't hear that.
Oh, I heard it. Okay. So I was like,
well, maybe it comes out on the track. One of the things I like that you said in your chapter was you made a definition between a drone owner, a drone pilot, and a drone professional. What was that?
So what I found is that I guess a thing that kind of irked me was when people, often what happens is people buy, I mean, there's thousands of drones here, even in Zimbabwe, and people will buy a drone. And the moment they buy a drone, they'll, you know, YouTube videos, Google, learn how to fly the drone. All of a sudden, they call themselves drone pilots. And now they're out there offering services and saying, hey guys, we do this and I'm a pilot. And I was like, but realistically speaking, you know, even, you know, looking at from a manned aviation, you know, kind of thing, no one goes around saying, hey, because I read this thing about, you know, about planes. And even if you buy your own private airplane, it doesn't make you a pilot. Buying a plane doesn't make you, you know, a pilot. At the end of the day, you actually have to go and get trained. So I was like, there's a culture that's been starting to breed where you buy a drone, you go on YouTube, you fly a couple of times, or you teach yourself how to fly it. All of a sudden you're a pilot. And I was like, we need to break that and have it clear. Because if we don't do that, then it makes it hard for those who are calling themselves professionals to identify themselves and to be able to be seen, and to have their own value set, apart from the people who are just buying drones and then they're starting to operate. So I was like, let's make it very clear. So even the forum that I started here locally, because there are very few, I mean, there's a handful of people in this country who have licenses because you have to get them obviously outside the country. So I called it the Drone Owners Forum, Drone Owners Forum, right? Not drone pilots, not whatever. You're an owner.
Okay, yes, yeah.
You own a drone, okay? And that's great. So we can talk about all these different things, but you're not a pilot, okay? Let's not even go down that road. So I was trying to define and say, you know what? There's drone owners, people who buy drones, and whether you've taught yourself, self-taught, you're just an owner. Once you've gone in, to get your license, and often people say when getting your license is actually a starting point. Getting your license, and you have now your RPAS or RPL, wherever you come from, that's a starting point. Now you've got the license, right? It doesn't mean now you have all this experience. You still also have to build your hours, get your experience. You know what I mean? Then you have, and that's where I would define and say you are a drone pilot. In other words, you've been trained and you have an understanding of all the different aspects that relate to drones being an aircraft, not a toy, and drones and the rules of the air within a specific context of wherever you've trained, okay? So that's, the drone pilot. Then you have a drone professional. A drone professional is someone who is actively, so you've got a license, or possibly you don't have a license because you're not involved necessarily with the actual flying aspect, but you're a professional because you work and you do work that is involved in growing the actual industry itself. So you could be a data analyst, right? That analyze data for drones. And you've gotten training around how to analyze data and all that kind of stuff. You are also a drone professional. It's not that you fly it per se, but you are a professional operating within the drone industry. So that's how I defined it and said, you know what, when you have that and you have the different separations, it's easier then to put people and say, okay, this is where you currently fit, and give people a path to move from being a drone owner to a drone pilot. Now you can create a path that's training specifically. That's the difference. Okay. I see. Yeah. And from being a drone pilot, you can be a professional, or you can call yourself a professional just because you've got your pilot license. But it doesn't mean that only pilots are professionals within the industry. You have other aspects. You have people who do repair and maintenance. Those are drone professionals. They may never get their pilot license, but they get licensed or trained in how to repair drones. They are also drone professionals. They're people who manufacture drones. Okay, your software engineers, your mechanical engineers, or whatever different classification that is. You don't have to have your RPAS for you to be a professional. Yep. So that's how I was just defining it and trying to separate that, just so that there's better understanding for people when we're talking and having conversations, be it with government or with educationists and schools and that kind of thing.
Mm. I like the definitions. I think that's a very good way of describing it. I'm just looking at the other questions I had here. I thought it quite neat how you talk about and I think you've covered it to a certain degree, but just to raise the point, I like how you explain that we are as much educators anyway. You're educating your clients, I mean, there's a perception that you can buy any drone and it's going to perform every single kind of application you can possibly imagine. Of course, that's not true. Then as you say, you're educating the industry, whether it's to forward regulations or whether it's to forward their incorporation into the education system. But then equally it is educating the kids or people in university and what have you. And I think that, that I hadn't thought of it quite like that on multiple levels, we're not just the professionals, we're also the educators, that we're the pioneers of this industry. And we do have a responsibility there to educate everybody and anybody about this.
Yeah, 100%. I think for us and the experiences has been a lot of the time is that clients have a perception. Everyone watches movies, right? And everyone sees what drones do in the movies. So you've got that thing where it's like, okay, a drone is a toy in one hand, and then a drone is the super kind of thing that can do all sorts of things. And then now to try and say, actually, no, that's not how it works. You then really have to look at it and say, okay, who's my client? What industry am I working in? And if it's agriculture, for example, which we're heavily involved in now, it's looking and saying, okay, fine. Within the agricultural space, there's crop spraying drones. There's drones that help you to do your mapping and plant and crop health assessments, etc. But they're different types of drones. You've got your multispectral drones now, like what DJI recently released. But they're very different drones, and oftentimes, our clients don't know and understand that. So our responsibility comes first and foremost in teaching them and educating them on the differences amongst the different drones, and then being able to say, okay, fine, this drone helps you with this one helps you with that, and have that understanding so that you can then say, okay, how do we help improve, whether it's processes on your farm, is it security, is it the actual, crop spraying, and crop spraying only works with certain crops. It's not just for everything as well, so it's a lot. And why I say we're immigrants is we're also discovering it as the technology comes out. Do you know what I mean? So the reason why there's limitations around which crops you can spray is because the technology is only advanced to that extent. Do you see what I mean? So if we then wanted to find a solution around spraying crops that currently can't be sprayed, that's where now an understanding of how the technology works from a technical standpoint would allow us to be able to build our own or to modify our own to meet the specific needs that relate to what we need on the ground. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, it's something I love. You can plonk a drone in front of people and suddenly, how can we use this? What can we do? And it's a really great tool, actually, just to inspire thoughts, to integrate, how a drone might be of value. And I love that in particular. It was really interesting. I went to a conference last year and they were explaining that, quite rightly, drones don't solve everything, but they're a valuable tool if you certainly look at a different system. And they were explaining it for the use of vineyards. And yes, a drone has value flying over the vineyards, but equally there were automated drones bimbling along the ground that were also using LiDAR, I think it was, to check the quality of the grapes. And then equally they're still doing hand samples of the soils. And then there's also satellite data. And it was all bringing this in together. And the drone had a role to play, but it wasn't the ultimate thing. But the point being is someone sat there and said, well, how can we integrate all of this? How can we play with it? And how can we make something better? And it's a great catalyst, I think, for inspiring people. and that kind of nice that comes out in the classroom as well. Kids might not think much about science, say, but you plonk this down, oh, how can I make this? I want to learn how to use this. So do you see, sorry, carry on.
Oh, I was saying, yeah. So I was saying, I love the way kids light up, like you're saying, when they see a drone. All of a sudden you have their attention, immediately when you bring out a drone, and that's important as a starting.
Do you find girls or equally sort of, oh hey, or do you find it's generally the boys that are more interested? Just curious.
What I found is in primary schools, we've been to a couple of primary schools, the girls, and funny enough, the girls are actually, we play with these, I'll just show you. We start them off with these little ones here. These are called it, and that kind of things like that. Yeah, so these minis, right? So we start them off here, and once they master being able to use these, and fly them, then we know already, we're at a good stage. So with that, we just get them to play with it. We teach them just basics on, how it operates, and trying to get them to see that it's not a toy. So we always bring this along with these ones. Right?
Oh, wow. Okay, yes.
So that people have an understanding. And obviously the bigger drones as well. We also bring those along so people have an understanding of, okay, this is how it works. And with that, I found that when we're actually just having fun, just teaching them how to fly, the little drones, the mini drones, the girls are better pilots. Most times. Most times they're better. So I really have found that. So I was like, this is really good. So I'm always encouraging, you know, that we need more women in the industry. We definitely need more, you know, because it's not, I guess drones are not something that discriminate or have a specific thing to say, okay, no, this is a boys kind of thing. You know what I mean? It's something that, you know, women would actually be probably better at certain aspects of this industry than you realize, you know, but if you don't allow them or give them the space to, if they themselves don't feel like they can get into it, then they're like, no, that's not for me. Whereas that's not true. You'd be surprised, actually.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it comes back to your definitions between the, you know, what the drone professional is. You don't have to fly the drone, but they can make value from the data, or they can design elements that are used on the drone or the camera or what have you. So yeah. Oh, cool. Okay. Sort of the next question is, I mean, have you been able to use your services in connection with sort of COVID-19 response, or how have you seen, what's your thoughts on the drone industry getting involved in helping with response to the current crisis?
Yeah, so COVID-19, when it first started, you know, gaining momentum in Africa and specifically in Zimbabwe, we had a couple of ideas that we were, you know, playing around with and trying to see how we could help. And one of those was actually around crop spraying, using the crop spraying drone, to spray disinfectant in the streets. We saw what China was doing, Spain, now Ghana, Rwanda, all these countries are now using drones in a similar way. So we saw that and we're like, okay, let's try it. The thing about it though is that there's no research proven or to prove that it works or it doesn't work. So it's more just logic and saying, okay, fine, you know, is it effective or not effective? We saw China doing it. We're just like, okay, let's also get out there. But more so from a perspective of, we want to be able to do our own research and have our own understanding and get on the ground and actually see, because we already know that, you know, spraying is being done using knapsacks. Okay. So if it's been done using knapsacks already, just using the, you know, those crop spraying drones, you'll be able to cover, you know, a larger area much quicker, and also with less personnel on the ground. Okay. So at that base level of just helping to improve and make the work being done already quicker, we can help. Okay. Before we talk about effectiveness. All right. Because if it's not effective with the drone, then it's also not effective with your knapsacks. Okay. So we should just remove it all, in my view. Whereas now the challenge, I guess, that we've been facing is that understanding with our government and them not really understanding drone technology and how it can help. And then also the issue to do with the regulations and how there's limited implementation. Therefore, there's so many hoops that you have to jump through, and there's no final say, you know, on who says you can or can't do this. You know, our civil aviation has been helping us a lot in trying to get the approvals necessary for us to get on the ground and do it. But the final say doesn't lie with them, unfortunately. You know, it lies with the military or this certain minister and all sorts of things. And we've gone far, talked to ministers, to all sorts of different people to try and get approval. And no one wants to sign off because no one really understands the tech. No one understands what we're doing. And also there's a mistrust between government and the people who are actually using the drones, because they don't know our intentions. So already it's like, you know, they come in from perspective of national security, you know, who are you and what are you trying to do and all sorts of things. So until they're comfortable with you as a person, you know, which I couldn't have done before COVID-19, unfortunately. I couldn't have gone around to all the ministers, hey guys, I'm a drone guy, so if ever there's a crisis, this is me, get to know me. You know what I mean? You know, now it's like, oh, we don't know you, we don't know your intentions. But I'm like, I'm a citizen and I'm just a person with a certain set of skills, and we're here to help. And we don't want your money either. You know, we're like, it's for free, guys. For free service. It's not going to cost government anything, but they're apprehensive, you know. So it's been difficult. We want to do the crop spraying. We also want to do use drones, and you know, I think you saw what Rwanda was doing. The Rwanda police with where they have like the Matrice 600, I think, and they put a loudspeaker or megaphone below it, and they're using that as a communication tool to communicate in rural areas I think even in South Africa, I think there's someone doing that as well. There's a company in South Africa. I think it's called Ntiso, Ntyiso, or something like that. They're also doing that.
Oh, okay.
Doing that.
I wasn't aware of that.
That's a tool used. Yeah, I found out yesterday, actually. I was on a webinar yesterday, on the DroneCon webinar. So I found that out. So they're using that as a communication tool to communicate and disseminate messages around, social distancing, washing your hands, etc., to rural communities. So that's another use case. I don't know about the thermal aspect. You've heard about the thermal, how people are using the camera to check people's temperatures from a distance. I don't know about that. I'm a bit like, okay. I've got no experience with that, so I can't really speak to that. But but I guess that's what we've been trying to do. And unfortunately, now it's been 4 weeks of trying to get approvals, and still nothing yet.
Yeah, it is a shame. I think there's been a criticism in various areas about, some authorities from around the world are not releasing this potential. But then again, it's a valid point. I mean, like, who are you and what are you going to do with the data? Potentially, as a citizen walking around in a street and having a drone flying over me, I might think, excuse me, why are you spying on me? You have no, you don't know what that data is being. And I must say, I have been concerned about it, and I've seen it. I think it was in America. They were starting to use drones to monitor and police social distancing, and they ended up stopping it because it was quite clear the public were not impressed with the spying, the big brother. So, and I think your word is perfect, trust. There needs to be a trust on this. And perhaps that's something that can go forward out of this, is that protocols are developed for future situations. But it's a shame sometimes when you know the potential and it isn't being used.
Yeah, for me, it's not the first time. Hey, last year we had a cyclone that ravaged our country in a certain part of our of Zimbabwe, and literally it was a cyclone. So then it created all this, like a landslide, all sorts of things. And people were marooned in different areas, aspects, bridges and roads washed away, etc. And at the time we were, when I started the drone forum here, and there were a number of people on the group, and I mobilized people and said, hey guys, let's, can we help out, and go out there and help. So I got about 18 different people with drones, we're talking Phantom 4s, a couple of Inspired 2s. And we wanted to go out there and help with, search and rescue, and also being able to identify areas or ways that people could get to, different access roads to get to where people are and that kind of thing. And possibly even play around with maybe, dropping like, emergency medical stuff or food packs or whatever. And I mean, we had 16 people, but in terms of the drones in total, we probably had about 25 or 26 ready to get in the air in total. And, we got one of these private companies that was helping out, in the relief efforts, basically agreed to sponsor us to go out there and pay just for our costs, of transport and all that kind of stuff. The day we're supposed to leave, the guys phoned ahead, and this non-governmental organization that was leading and helping us phoned ahead and, talked to the military commander who was in charge of the relief kind of efforts and that kind of thing there. And, the commander just said, no, we don't want to see you and your drones here. We don't want you to come here. And I was confused. I was like, wow. And I'm like, in the whole country at the time, we only had 3 helicopters that were working to help with relief efforts. We then got a 4th one, I think, from South Africa, and I was like, then the area that they could cover, was so small, and they had to do so many different operations, and how much fuel and all sorts of things that we're using to do that. And I was like, but guys, we have 20 plus drones that could be deployed across like a whole region, have different people at different points. We can gather data. Not only are we going to help in terms of finding people, finding access roads, or finding new ways to get to people, we're going to be able to then map out the area so that we can do a post-disaster assessment. And I got so angry. I got so frustrated. I was like, how can you not see? Why are you not seeing how drones can help? You know, I ended up, you know, pushing to get the commander's number. I spoke to him myself on the phone. I spoke to his superior. And they're like, no, you need to go to Ministry of Defense. You need to go to this other ministry, get this, you know, talk to them. We don't know you, basically. So we don't know what you want to do. So, so it hurt me. I mean, it pained me.
Yeah.
When I was like, guys, we could have genuinely even possibly saved lives, you know, using this technology. But, you know, there's no understanding. You just like, no, stay. And I'm like, no. Yeah.
Oh dear.
So, yeah.
No, I can imagine your frustration and anger. Yeah. Yes, there's still so much to do in terms of realizing the potential, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot.
Cool. Well, I mean, you've said a heck of a lot of really interesting stuff today. And I mean, your chapter, I think, covers so many interesting topics. How can someone get hold of you if they want to talk to you more?
Well, yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn a lot, on Facebook. We're still developing and building out our website. We had it up. We're just, you know, tweaking some things on that. So I'm available. My name, Tawanda J. Chihambakwe. That's on LinkedIn and that's on Facebook. And there you can get like my phone number and all that kind of stuff. So that's where I'm at. I'm pretty good at it on that. So yeah, well, since we're in lockdown.
Yes.
So
yes, okay.
Yeah.
All right,
so
cool. I'll put those links on the with the description and the on the LinkedIn post as well. So that's cool. But great, thank you very much, Tawanda, for your time today. It was really some really interesting things that you're doing, and almost doing pending the authorities, but but no, absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much. Just sign off to the audience. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today. There are a couple more videos to come with some of the remaining authors. But in the meantime, yeah, have a look at what Tawanda has to say in his chapter in Drone Professional 1. It really is very interesting to read. This is a great book, I say so, as does many others, in fact. But the point being is it's there on Amazon and Kindle and paperback format. If you want to know about the industry, have a look at this, about the professional industry. In the meantime, please keep well and keep safe, and see you on the next video. Cheers.